into our team previews, starting with Atlanta United, one of the best expansion franchises in club history. They've already got an MLS Cup. They have all sorts of records. They've got all sorts of star players, star coaches. How are they going to transition and keep that going in 2020? So all the people out there know, as we preview these teams, we are looking at the 2020 MLS transfer tracker, looking at some of the players in and out from Atlanta United this season. Some of the players in: homegrown defender George Campbell, Brooks Lennon, you may remember him from Real Salt Lake, and Anton Walks, a transfer from Portsmouth, and Fernando Mesa, someone from Club Tijuana, a center back from Liga MX, which just continues that trend of teams and players from Liga MX doing business and coming north of the border here to the MLS. They got Edgar Castillo on a free transfer, Adam John, a transfer from Phoenix Rising. Mike, you had a little funny thing you wanted to mention about Mr. John.
Yeah, so Adam John was the player for the Columbus Crew back in their Atlanta's expansion season in the playoffs when they had a 0-0 draw with Columbus, and it went to penalty kicks, and Zach Steffen stood on his head. Adam John was the player for Columbus that scored the game-ending goal, and he shushed the entire crowd over in the supporter section, and that guy is now playing for Atlanta United. Like, how things come full circle is beyond me.
I wonder what kind of reception he's going to get from the fans there. Maybe a few boos on his first trot out on the field, but after that, I'm sure the Five Stripes fans will welcome him as one of their own.
Hey,
Well, we'll
you
see.
never know.
We'll see. Also on the way in, midfielder Jake Mulroney, a transfer from, let me make sure I'm getting this right, Heart of Midlothian from the Scottish Premier League. So bringing in a Scottish international, hopefully you can follow in the footsteps of Johnny Russell and be as successful for Atlanta as Russell has been for Kansas City. And then another player in, Matheus Rossetto, a transfer in from Atletico Paranaense. And now, Mike, the last bit of rumor here as far as their transfers in go is a 24-year-old Manuel Castro, a right winger, could come in on a free transfer. So what do you kind of make of that rumor? What do you think if it's going to happen? Fill us in a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I saw it reported today, and we've had a history of these things happening to us when we record these previews. We'll record, and then by the time we release the episode 24 hours later or so, these signings have happened. It happened most recently last week with Derek Etienne. We were talking about it for Columbus or talking about him for New York Red Bulls. So check out that one if you haven't listened to it or viewed it yet. And what do you know? He signs with Columbus right after Nick was talking about how he should be signed somewhere in this league. And 24 hours later was done. So there's a rumor that this Manuel Castro, a right winger, is from Argentina, is apparently rumored to be picked up as kind of a Tito Villalba replacement. Looks like it's going to be a 6-month loan for free. So it's going to be a free loan for 6 months and then a $3 million buy option. So it could get done. And if it is, then, $3 million price probably puts him in that TAM to designated player range. So it's not done yet as we record here Monday the 10th, but it could be done by the time we release this episode on the 11th. So I did want to put it in there because MLS Buzz has reported it. Reddit for Atlanta was going nuts regarding it. So I think it's probably going to happen.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like that'd be a great signing for Atlanta, really getting creative with some of their contract terms there, especially with the new CBA, which we'll touch on hopefully at the end of the episode. They'll be able to either work him in as a DP or bring him in as that kind of third DP where he's making TAM type of money and give him a little more salary cap flexibility. Do you know Tito Villalba was occupying a DP slot, right, for them?
He was when he came over, when he originally signed, but he was not a DP last season. He had kind of his contract had got structured down to be TAM.
So that's the players in on the for Atlanta United. Players out. Couple of big names, couple of household MLS names here. Darlington Nagbe gets traded to Columbus, which we kind of saw coming based on everything Nagbe was wanting. He went from Portland to Atlanta to Columbus back home. Kind of saw the writing on the wall a season ago. Good for Atlanta for what they got for him, and hopefully he fits in well with Columbus. Another kind of name that everyone knows here is Justin Miram. His option got declined. Breck Shea, a guy who never really filled out his potential, he's out of contract and did not get re-signed. Also of note, Leandro Gonzalez Perez, LGP, transferred to Club Tijuana. So a guy who is integral on the back line for Atlanta United after their couple seasons in MLS, their cup winning season. A guy who, in my opinion, needs to take a hit, and then he is one of the most entertaining players to watch in MLS. Like, if he does not get a foul called in his favor, then it's just game on for LGP. Like, he's going to be making that up against the opposing team. So sorry to see him leave the league, but happy that he's probably going to get a lot more time and a lot more money down in Liga MX. Also of note, Julian Gressel, big up-and-comer for Atlanta, traded to DC United. So we expect big things out of him in DC, and we'll see how they fill his shoes here in Atlanta. Other names on the way out, Brandon Vasquez, Chris Goslin, Jose Hernandez, Patrick Okonkwo, who ended up signing with Montreal, if I'm correct on that,
That's
right,
a different
Mike?
Okonkwo.
A different Okonkwo. There's a whole family of them. Imagine that. Also, options declined on Florentine Pogba, Mikey Ambrose, Kevin Kratz. John Gallagher was loaned out to Aberdeen and had his contract extended. Dion Pereira and the club part ways. Lagos Kunga off to Phoenix Rising, and Andrew Carlton loaned out to the Indy 11. So lots of roster moves for a team that has been at the top of the Eastern Conference since joining the league. Mike, is this signifying kind of a new era for Atlanta United? Is this a rebuild, a reload? What do you make of all this movement?
Yeah, I'd put it more as a reload, just because their main star players aren't switching. They did lose some guys like LGP who are very integral to that team, as well. You look at some of the other names you mentioned like Julian Gressel, but I think I would put it more towards reload. They're bringing in some more young South American talent like they have done many times in the past and been extremely successful with. So they still have a great base. They're still a strong team. A lot of movement, which is a bit surprising when you have a successful season like Atlanta did last season, where they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, won multiple trophies, U.S. Open Cup, Campiones Cup. Didn't win the East. They fell a little bit short to New York City in that one, but for the regular season and the playoffs as well to Toronto FC. But overall, a lot of movement, which is surprising, but I think they're good moves and a lot of depth pieces as well, outside of those two or three guys that are out of the starting 11.
So with that, let's look at some of those core players that have stuck around. Let's start with the three DPs here. Josef Martinez, Pity Martinez, and who's the third one? Ezekiel Barco. There it is.
Yep.
Buried in my notes here. Martinez, Barco, and Josef. Yes. So, Mike, what's your take on the three DPs, and what do you expect from them this upcoming season?
Well, Josef Martinez, it's enough said. The man score goals. That's what he does. He just bags them left and right, and he will continue to do so. I have no doubt about that. Ezekiel Barco, this is kind of a question mark, right, for him. It's his third year with Atlanta. He's still only 20 years old, which is ridiculous. This is one of the biggest up and comers in the world of football, not just in the United States, in Argentina, where he's from. This guy is kind of one of the big young stars of the game. There's been lots of rumors as far as teams over in Europe, big teams that are interested in him, Inter Milan and some English teams. So it's interesting. He didn't have great numbers in his first season, and you can kind of give that off to the transition from Argentina to the United States, and plus being that he's so young, right? Then the second season was injury plagued, and he missed a lot of time with the U20 World Cup for Argentina. So this is the year where, to me, it's a make or break year for him. I think he needs to have a good season, improve on the numbers that he's already had here in MLS, do a little bit better, at least from a numbers perspective, and try not to get hurt. And I think that will work out well for him if he does so, and as well for the franchise of Atlanta to get them to be able to sell him or keep him as the superstar that he's budding into. The third one, Pity Martinez, kind of same story, right? This is his second season instead of his third, like Barco. 5 goals and 9 assists last season in 32 appearances. So not a really successful season, but given that it was his first season coming over from Argentina, and this guy was the CONMEBOL Player of the Year, so it's not, that's no slough award to get. So he came over here. He did the adjustment to the United States. He had some issues with Frank de Boer. They seemed to iron those out. Again, this is his year to kind of say it's either going to be the move as a whole is going to be a bust, or it's going to be good for him and Atlanta. So those are kind of my thoughts on the DPs. What thoughts do you have on them, Nick?
You read about Martinez. He's going to be the primary goal scorer. He's going to take all the attention from the defense. I have yet to see an MLS club figure out a way to defend Josef Martinez other than just throwing numbers at him. The problem is Josef is just good enough where he can distribute the ball when he needs to. But then you've got to have guys like Barco and Martinez and some of the other players on Atlanta's roster step up and alleviate some of the pressure on Josef so that he doesn't just get locked down in the total focus. But he's going to be the primary goal scorer. He has been since Atlanta United came into this league, and he will continue to do that. You're right. Barco and Martinez definitely need to step up. There's no more excuses for them. I guess maybe you give Barco, another year if you want to, another year or two just because of his age. But he does need to stay healthy. He does need to at least put up maybe 15 goals and assists combined this year just to show that he can contribute and play at the MLS level, because we know Atlanta's business model. We know that they want to get these young, talented players, mostly from South America we've seen, and then really build them up, have them get success in the MLS, and then flip them and sell them overseas for, double, triple of what Atlanta United paid for, and then just continue to raise the prominence of Atlanta. And then from a league perspective, raise the prominence of the league. You got Miguel Almiron, who's playing well for Newcastle. I'm not saying he's lighting up the Premier League by any means, but he's playing well for Newcastle. That was a good investment for them. Maybe their coach isn't using him in the best way, but I think Miguel Almiron, again, that's the example that we've been given. But you look at Alphonso Davies, a guy who's playing for Bayern Munich, starting over there. There's probably others that I'm forgetting who have gone overseas lately. But that's the Atlanta business model. That's the point that we're trying to make here. That's the point Atlanta United's trying to make here. For that to happen, Barco has to have a good season. And you're right, it's time for Pity Martinez to step up, and 10 goals, 15 goals, something like that, where he can complement Josef and then just be a creative attacking force. You're right, maybe there was a little something there with Frank de Boer, and I feel like that happened with the whole team. You saw that early on in Atlanta's season last year, where they got off to a terrible start. Like, the train had barely left the station, and there were just rumors abound about, de Boer's already lost the locker room. You're right, they ironed that out. They took care of that. They put a spike in it, so to say, for Atlanta United fans.
Nice.
But now it's time to start fresh. Start with all of that behind them. They don't have to go through any of that transition anymore, and neither does Pity Martinez. So I expect a lot of them. I expect Atlanta to come out hot and really, really light the league up those first 2-3 weeks, those first 4 or 5 games. And speaking of the 3 DPs, one of them has to be their most important player. I mean, we've got Josef Martinez in our notes as our most important player for obvious reasons, but it wouldn't surprise me if Barco ends up becoming their most important player, or Pity Martinez becomes their most important player, just because they have so much potential and so much to do in the midfield and in the attack for Atlanta United. But you wanted to talk about Josef Martinez here, Mike, so I'm going to let you have your minute to praise the greatest goal scorer the MLS has ever seen, arguably.
Very arguably. This guy, he as he goes, so does the team. So I think there's no question here that he is the most important player for Atlanta United. When he's healthy, and if he scores 20 goals, which he seems to do with relative ease, I can't even remember what the number was last season. It was something like, 11, 12, 13 matches in a row that he had scored a goal in. Just ridiculous type numbers. If he doesn't put up those type of numbers, yeah, even if Pitty's putting up numbers and Barco's doing well, if Josef Martinez isn't scoring over 20 goals next season, well, this season coming up, it's gonna be trouble for them. As he goes, so does the team. You saw a regression in Atlanta towards the end of the season when he had missed those few games with injury. They didn't lose them all. They still won games, but you saw a regression in their play. So I think that you're definitely their most important player is Josef Martinez. And again, as you mentioned, the DPs, you definitely need good performances out of those guys as well. But I think Josef is what it really boils down to for Atlanta.
Yeah, and league-wide, if a team is going to be successful, you need your DPs to be successful. You got to have your best players playing their best soccer. It's something that I've said a bunch of times. It's something that we've mentioned a lot on this show. I mean, that's the way the league is built right now. They're expanding a lot of this in the new collective bargaining about bringing up minimum player salaries, kind of expanding some DP level type rules. But at the end of the day, you want your best players playing your best soccer, and that's Josef, Petey, and Barco for Atlanta United. Now, we've talked about the established players. We want to feature a possible breakout youngster for every team. So for Atlanta United, we've put down George Bello as the breakout youngster, the 18-year-old defender who has made a few appearances since 2018, was hurt last year, got some youth call-ups, as well as for the U17 World Cup. But Mike, there's a lot more to George Bello if he's going to be a breakout player, and that probably rests on his injury history. So, what did you read about that?
Yeah, so George Bello, 18 years old. The guy fits breakout youngster as a defender. There was some talk of him getting, he got a little bit of time last year as well, a couple of appearances. However, really, as a whole for Atlanta, this team has so much young talent, but none of them can really be considered breakout youngsters, right? I mean, you've got guys like Barco. He's not breaking out. Everybody knows who he is. There's a lot of young talent on this team, and really, that's a good position to be in. That you don't really have a bunch of guys that could be those breakout defenders. It was funny, the conversations on Reddit that we had with Atlanta fans was just, I mean, these guys are all like, well, I guess Bello. I mean, we really don't have any like. There's nothing, there's really nothing to say here. We don't need anybody to break out. We've got guys at every position. We're good to go. And we have guys who are young at every position who have already broken out. So, a little bit of talk about Mulroney, one of the new signings they brought over from Hearts. So that maybe that's a possibility as well. But really, Bello, just a note on him, though. He did have a bit of an injury during the preseason game against Birmingham Legion of the USL. He did, seems to be like some type of concussion. There's no official team statement out yet on what exactly happened. But he was apparently just cleared to fly back to Atlanta today. A couple days after the game. So hopefully he's all right. Hopefully, it's just a couple weeks out with some, maybe a minor concussion or something. There is some ramblings that it is good news. But again, take that with a grain of salt because you don't know exactly how that information got, sent over. But that's pretty much the only option. I mean, that I've got for breakout youngster. You got any thoughts, Nick?
I think that's where you got to go. Like you said, the Atlanta United fans that we've talked to, and their roster, the way their roster is, like you said, this is a reload, not a rebuild. The talent that they need to have good seasons is already on the roster. It's already been guys who've been playing. So they just need their starting 11 to play as the best starting 11 they can. And speaking of that starting 11, because I'm so good at transitions and segues, we put together our own projected starting 11 here. Mike, you've been poring over roster formations from Atlanta United. They used 3 different formations in last season's playoffs. What lineup did you pick, and what players did you put in there?
I'm going with the same formation that, like kind of the same way that we've done it with all the other teams that we've done. Just keeping it with that last game, a 4-3-2-1. Guzan in goal. There's no question there. Just got the extension. You got I think Mulroney, the new signing from Hearts, will break into left back. Miles Robinson and Meza, the new center back from Tijuana, as well as Franco Escobar on the right. Then in the 3 in the mid, you got Barco, Lorenowitz, and Remedy. And then Pity Martinez, Emerson Hidman, and then up front, of course, who else but Josef Martinez. That's pretty much the best guess that I have without, the rumors here of the new signing that's coming in. And then I would assume he would jump into the starting 11, the Manuel Castro, if he does, if that move does come through to fruition. But yeah, that's kind of the starting 11 that I've got there for Atlanta, just to kind of get things rolling this season. But it is kind of up in the air as far as what formation DeBoer is going to play, because he does like to tinker with his formations a lot.
Absolutely. And we know Atlanta is in the CONCACAF Champions League. We know that they're going to be playing for multiple trophies domestically, whether it's the MLS Cup, the Supporters Shield, or the U.S. Open Cup. So he's going to need to cycle through a lot of players to keep fresh legs and deal with whatever injuries or knocks come their way. You did mention Brad Guzan got the extension. Just looking at the article on MLSsoccer.com, it just says that Atlanta United and Guzan have agreed to a multi-year contract extension. So I guess technically a multi-year extension could be as little as 2 years, but I'm thinking more likely, 3 or 4, and maybe see him transition into a backup role when he can train some new young goalkeepers that come through, or at least be a part of the organization, kind of like a pseudo ambassador going forward. So with that, now we wrap up our Atlanta United preview with their ceiling and their floor. And it's pretty obvious with the talent on their roster that the ceiling for this team is they win the Eastern Conference. They maybe become the first MLS team to win CONCACAF Champions League, multiple trophies. I don't know if they're going to have a record-breaking season, something that could top LAFC or Toronto FC of recent vintage, but definitely multiple trophies are within the reach of this Atlanta United team. As far as a floor, again, they're still too talented. I still think the East is not as good as its top teams or as the Western Conference. So given all of that, I think Atlanta United, if the bottom falls out, if they get off to a rough start again, if, we were talking about Barco getting hurt, something like that, maybe they fall to the 5th or 6th spot in the Eastern Conference and then have to go play an away game, which might not work out so well for them. We know how much they love playing at the Benz, those home games, those home crowds. So I think it would be pretty terrible for Atlanta United if they fell further than the 4th spot and had to go on the road for the playoffs. But that being said, Mike, they got their first game against Montagua in the CONCACAF Champions League on the 18th, and then the following, I think the 29th or so, they start their MLS campaign. What do you expect from Atlanta United, and what should the fans be happy with? Like, do we need to temper expectations of these Atlanta United fans after these first couple of years already?
I don't think so, because I think they have enough talent to stay on that level and continue to do extremely well. So I think they're fine. I agree with your predictions as far as ceiling and floor goes. The first game against Motagua and CCL, I think a side like that, it's a good matchup to have as your first. So you've got kind of that extra preseason game, because let's be serious, Motagua can't hang with Atlanta United. So barring some crazy disaster, which is possible because it's CCL and anything can happen in the CCL, as we've seen, it should be a fairly easy run through of 2 legs. The first game down there in Honduras, and then the second game at Kennesaw, at that tiny stadium there. So Overall, I'm excited for Atlanta this season. I think it's going to be another good year. So don't temper your expectations, fans. You get to be spoiled with another successful year in the making, I'm sure. So those are my thoughts on Atlanta. And that's about it.